Hey there, it's Mr. McTavish, and welcome to Tech Design and our first part for our robot design. So I'm in Onshape. Now, I organize by folders. I encourage people to organize by folders so they can find things again. We are going to create a document. So with the document, we're going to give it a name and the initials. Your initials are going to be the first characters in it. So my initials are IBM, so that's what I'm starting with. The next two are going to be which project this is. My project, this is tech design, so I'm using TD. What I try to do is have a different two letters or numbers for every project that I do. And this is going to be an assembly, and it's 00. So we're going to call this the full robot. So that's what we're going to do. And you can add tech labels. So I'm going to add a TDJ 21, 22 for this year. And there we go. So here we are. We're in our full robot, and we are in the first Part Studio 1. And you can see there's also Assembly 1. I'm going to be going over this fairly fast. So with the video, you can refer to it, and I will try to explain what I'm doing as I do it. So that will hopefully help. A couple things. You'll notice that we have our three planes, our top plane, our front plane, and our right plane, and our view cube over here where we can click part of the view cube to rotate our view. So we're good. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the top plane. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to want a little bit more screen real estate. So the tab manager, bottom left, Alt T, if I select that, I can hide the tab manager, and that way I can see more of the screen. So down at the bottom left, tab manager, you can do that to see all the different part studios and assemblies and things. And by clicking it, you can hide it. So here I am, I've got my top view selected, and it's nice bright orange indicating that it's selected, and I'm going to start with a sketch. So with the sketch, we're going to design a robot, and when we're in a sketch, there's a couple key concepts that you need to remember. First off, this little dialog box shows that you're in the sketch. If you do something, so I'm just going to, don't do this, I'm just going to demonstrate. So let's say I draw a rectangle. If I click the red X, what happens is it cancels my sketch. So all that work is gone. So you want to keep that in mind. So again, there's the top, the sketch. The other thing is that if you do add a sketch and you click the green check mark, that forces you out of the sketch, but your drawing is still there. Now, the problem is maybe you want to make a change. Well, what you do is you open the sketch up again by double clicking it, and now you can make edits to it. I'm just going to make that a bit bigger, green check mark, and it's saved. Many people will just create a second sketch, and that's going to be an issue. So you want to be very careful with that. The other thing that you want to be careful of is, I'm just going to delete this. Let's say I'm looking at the top view and I want to make a sketch. If I click the wrong plane and do a sketch, when I try to draw, you'll see nothing seems to be happening. And what's going on is that I'm drawing on the front plane and I'm looking at the top plane. So that's why I can't see what's going on. So I need to make sure that the plane that I'm looking at matches the plane that I'm sketching on so that I can actually do my work. The trick with this, let's just change our view again, is when I'm doing a sketch, if I select my plane and press the letter N, it's going to normalize my view and change it so that it looks at what plane I'm drawing on. So the letter N normalizes your view. Okay, I'm just going to cancel this sketch. Now, we're going to create a sketch, but before we begin, we need to think about our robot, and we're going to create some variables. So this little icon here is the variable icon, and depending on the size of your screen, you might not be able to see it. So you might see only the first element in that block of icons. No matter what, you should always see the search tools. So you can always click on that and start typing var, and there's variable. So we're going to create a variable. So we're going to create a number variable, and we're going to give it a name, and we are going to call this length. And our robot is going to be 32 inches long. So our length is going to be 32. Now, you'll notice that I selected number, not length. The reason is that I might need to do some math, and I can't add when it's lengths and things. I can add numbers. So I'm going to select that. Important point, let's make sure we're dealing with inches. Our 3 lines up here, workspace units, and just make sure we're dealing with inches so everything's good. So I have my length variable. I'm going to add another variable, and remember, variable, if you can't find it, use the search tool. And there we go. So with my length, I'm going to have my width. And I'm going to select 27 inches and green check mark. Now, in class, we're going to go over why we picked those dimensions. Basically, they're dimensions of our last robot, and so we know it's a really good combination that works really well. We're going to need another variable, so we're going to create a third variable, and again, number. This time we're going to call it wheel width. Now, you'll notice I've put no space in there. All right, that is really, really important. If I have a space, what's going to happen is that when I try to save it, you'll see this has gone red. Red is a color that they indicate there's a problem. So if you do this, and you can hold your mouse and it explains it, and it must be a letter followed by a string of letters or numbers. So I can't do it with the space. So that's a really important thing, is watch for red. If there's red, then you know there's an issue, and solve the issue. So green check mark. So I've got my variable set. I'm going to select my top plane. I'm going to select the sketch button. So I should see my sketch 1, top plane. And now I'm going to select my tools. So with our tools, we've got our drawing tools. There's a rectangle tool, and you can see it looks like a rectangle. Again, I can use search. I can type rectangle, and I can find the rectangle tool. The drop down allows me to select what type of rectangle. So for this, I'm going to use the center point rectangle, and you'll see that the letter R is the shortcut. So I could just type the letter R, and when I hit the letter R, that will turn this on, and if it's selected, then it would turn it off. The other tool I'm going to select is this one, the construction tool. And again, holding my mouse over it tells me that the letter Q is the shortcut. So just type the letter Q, and now we should have our rectangle tool and our construction tool highlighted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my mouse over the middle origin, and so you can see the origin goes bright orange, and there's a little icon that shows up. So this orange is telling me, that little icon is the coincident icon, and it is telling me that when I click, that is going to lock the center of my rectangle to the origin. So I'm going to click there. I'm going to move my mouse up and down, and there we go. And just click. I'm going to do that again just to explain. So I'm going to undo. Doing it a second time just to explain. Rectangle tool, letter R. Construction tool, letter Q. Hold the mouse over the origin. When it's orange like that, you click once. You move your mouse up and to the right. Don't worry about the distances. And then you click a second time. Now, what I want you to do is hit escape on your keyboard. ESC, it's top left corner of your keyboard. That is the escape key. Here we are. This is our rectangle. You'll notice a few things. Number one, if I try to move my rectangle around, I can make it bigger or smaller, but it's always centered on that origin. So that's really important. Also, these lines are dotted. That indicates that they're construction lines. So I can't make them into a three-dimensional object. They are construction lines so that way I can use it for geometry, which is what I'm going to do. The other thing is, you'll see that these lines are blue. When they are blue, that means that they're not fully constrained. It is really important to always fully constrain your sketches. Now, what I mean by that is fully constrained means that it knows where the rectangle is. In this case, it's centered on the origin, and it knows the dimensions. Now, we haven't set the dimensions, so that's why. So we're going to set the dimensions right now. The dimension tool is this tool right here, and you can see the letter D. Always learn the keyboard shortcuts for the tools that you're going to use all the time. We're going to use the dimension tool a lot. So click the letter D, that will select the dimension tool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click this line right here, and we're going to move our mouse up, and it's going to give us the dimension. When we click a second time, it's going to allow us to type the dimensions. So what we're going to do is we're going to type the number sign, and that will bring up all of our variables, and we're going to select the width variable for that. So I can use my arrow to move down, and I can hit enter when I've selected the width, and enter again. And just like that, you'll see I've got to zoom out, and how I'm doing that is I'm using my scroll wheel, and I can see I've set my width to be 27 inches. So my sidelines here are black now because they are fully constrained. We know that they're exactly 27 inches between those two lines, and they're centered on the origin. So I'm going to now set the length. So again, if you had turned the dimension tool off, make sure it's on. Click this line right here, move your mouse, click. And what we're going to do is number sign and find the length. There's the length. You hit enter and enter. And just like that, we have created a rectangle that is 27 inches by 32 inches. This is our sketch. I'm going to click the pencil. I'm going to type sketch perimeter and the green check mark. That's great. Now, the reason I'm doing the check mark is I want you to get into the habit of editing sketches by saving them, going back in to them. This is the feature tree. Everything you do is in this feature tree. And as we add new stuff, it'll come down here. And the key thing is you can edit things that you did before. So I can edit the length. I could change a different length. If I change the length, it will change my drawing. So it's very, very powerful that way. So I've got my length, I've got my width. I'm going to go back into the perimeter, sketch perimeter, and this is up. Now I'm ready to create my sketch. So we're going to start with the rectangle, but this time we're going to select a corner rectangle. So the letter G is the shortcut for that. And again, that's the menu item. So it's right near the beginning. There's the line and then the rectangle. If you've got a small Chromebook window, you might see the first item in a little drop down, and then you can see everything else that's in the menu. So corner rectangle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my mouse over this point, and using the scroll wheel is really helpful. So I can zoom in, and what it will do is it will zoom in based on whatever point I've got my mouse over. So I'm going to just zoom in so I can see this. This is orange. When I have that point orange, I'm going to click and I'm going to move over here. And when this line is orange, that means that it's forcing it to be this line. And I'm going to click. So that's going to create a rectangle. Now you'll notice it automatically puts in the dimensions. I'm going to show you something right now. If I select this dimension, I'm going to hit enter to select that dimension. You'll notice it's gone red. And what's happened here is that it is over constrained. And what I mean by that is that I have said, hey, I want this line to be 27 inches. So I've set the width of that line. Also, I want to make sure that this line is touching this line. Well, it happens to be right now that that makes it 27 inches. So technically it does work, but this is over constrained because the software goes, hey, you might change that variable and then this will be impossible to draw. If I change my width and I'm trying to force this line to be 27 inches and I want it to be touching that and I change that variable, it will no longer be touching. And so that's why it's an error. So the red indicates an error. When you get an error, use the undo button. And I did a few things there. So I'm just undoing until, because I moved that, and figure out what happened. So in that case, I'm just going to repeat it. What happened there is that I constrained it and I set the measurement for that length, which I didn't want to do. So I'm just going to undo that and I'm going to do it one more time. So I'm going to hold my mouse over here. I'm going to click. I'm going to move over here and I'm going to click. Now I'm going to hit the escape button again. So the escape button on the keyboard is really, really useful. So what I want to do is I want to set my dimensions. So remember the keyboard shortcut is the letter D. So I'm going to hit the letter D. And what I want is if I click this line and that line, I can set the distance between them. And I'm going to move over here and I'm going to click my mouse. I'm going to hit the number 1 on my keyboard and enter. So I have now set this rectangle is fully constrained because you'll see when I hold my mouse over here, this point has to be touching that line. So that's the coincident. So that point is touching that line. And if I hold my mouse over that, you can see they're highlighted. So whoops, there we go. So that's highlighted. So that forces this to be a certain length because that point is got to be touching that line as well. So there we go. That's that point right there. And I've set the distance between these two lines to be 1 inch. So that's why that's black. It's fully constrained. That's great. I now want to add a rectangle. And what I'm going to do is you'll notice I want to select the line. I don't want the dotted line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose select other. So select other allows me to select one of the things underneath my where my mouse is, and I'm going to select the edge of that. So that's that. Right click, select other. I want that short little line. I want that line and that line. That's a really useful tool to select. So I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to mirror this. So I'm going to select the mirror and I'm going to select that line right there. So it's right through the center. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So I'm going to select that. And now I'm going to select all of the lines in that rectangle. So I'm going to select that. Remember, right click, select other. And I'm going to find the short line. That's the one I want. Right click, select other. Where's the solid line? There it is. And I'm panning by holding down the scroll wheel on my mouse and moving to the side. Right click, select other. There we go. So if I zoom out, you can see I now have a rectangle at the bottom. And the fact that these are gray indicates that they are fully enclosed. I'm just going to stop right there. I'm going to click the green check mark. So I have a rectangle there. That's what I'm going to make my robot frame out of. Before I do that, I want to just explain when something is fully enclosed. So I'm just going to create a second sketch that I'll delete later. So top plane. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a little rectangle over here and it's solid. So this sketch I can extrude. And when I extrude it, I can select the sketch and I can make it into a 3-dimensional shape, just like that. So to be able to do the extrude, I'm just going to delete that and go back into that sketch. This has to be fully constrained. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little break in there. So I'm adding some points and I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to cut out that little piece of line. Now, you'll see this is no longer gray, and that tells me that there's a break. And it's pretty obvious that there's a break. But if I try to extrude it now, you can see I'm getting red, and this extrude is red because it's saying, hey, there's nothing to extrude. There is a hole in this. And because there's that hole, it can't extrude it. If I close the hole, so I'm just going to add a line between them and make it solid, you can see that that extrude is now going to work because it's a solid shape. So that's really important. And so if you have done that properly, you should have gray down here. Now, the mirror tool, let's go back in here. Oops, I'm hitting buttons and normalize. The mirror tool was really handy because then I can create those shapes and those rectangles. And the bonus is that if I change something, because it's mirrored, it will change both things. So that's why I'm using that tool, so that if I decide to make a change, it will change both things automatically. So I now have the front piece of the robot and the back piece. I'm going to do my side pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a square tube along the front, a square tube along the back, and a square tube on the left and a square tube on the right. Now, how I'm doing this is going to be a West Coast drive. So my rectangle is going to be inside here, and later on you're going to see why. So I'm going to click the rectangle tool. So remember, that's G. I'm going to hold my mouse over this. I'm going to click once. I'm going to move down. I'm going to make sure it's on that line, and I'm going to click a second time. Now, I have two possible measurements. This one I want to set. So if I hold my mouse over it, I should be able to have it highlighted, and then I can just not click or anything, just type 1, enter. And I don't want to set this one, so I'm going to hit the escape key on my keyboard. So I now have a rectangle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fully constrain this rectangle using my dimension tool, and I'm going to select this dotted line and that line, and I'm going to move my mouse down here, and I'm going to type the number sign and then select wheel width and enter. Enter. So now I have a 2-inch space between those two lines. It's a little hard to see, but if I zoom in, you can see there's little arrows indicating between these two lines, it is 2 inches. I'm just going to undo that and do that again. Okay, so here's my dimension tool. I'm going to click that line and move my mouse, type the number 2. There we go. Turn off the dimension tool. So again, I can mirror this. So there's my mirror tool. I'm going to select this line this time. So that is my mirror line. And now I'm going to select those two lines. And you can see, I'm just going to turn this off. I don't have to do the selecting of the small line because this was already a solid line. So it's fully constrained. I now have the perimeter of my robot. And in our next tutorial, we're going to learn how to take that shape and make it into a 3-dimensional object. Right now, it's a 2-dimensional sketch. So I have a rectangle up top, rectangle on the bottom, rectangle for the left rail, rectangle for the right rail. And that is going to be the perimeter of my robot. I'm going to make sure that I've exited the sketch, the green check mark, so you can see by the toolbar that now you're just in the standard part studio. So stay tuned for our next episode where we will start making this into a 3-dimensional